Joined now by Alex VanBeek. He is the vice president of VanBeek Natural Science. Thanks for taking some time with us today, Alex. Want to jump right in. How does your company's products help address the root causes of mortality, and what kind of measurable financial impacts have you been able to observe so far in this area?
Yeah, good question. We have a couple of different approaches, and I think it'll carry through the line of this conversation. But communication and education, I think, are some of the most important aspects of what we do, more even so than the products we create. However, there's technologies inside our products that when you look at root causes of mortality, it's often in that early stage of the piglet's life. And so if we can look at the gestation period where the sow is preparing everything she needs for that piglet or that litter, then if we can manipulate some of those things through the feed and create a healthy sow program, that gets passed on to the piglets. So, for example, some measurable financial type of settings, IgG levels in the sow's colostrum, we can close to double the IgG levels, and then that transfers over to the total serum proteins found in the piglet's blood. That's one of them. I mean, a huge difference in defense mechanisms early on in that pig's life is critical, especially going into challenging environments. So there's many different things inside of there. I mean, we changed, drastically improve litter weight, born alive, mummies reduction, also litter wean weight, individual piglet wean weight. Well, we all know in production, on day one, that's the most important day. Day two is the second most important, and so on. The more I can elevate growth and intake in those first days, I set myself up for success. Most producers understand the concept of that, but need a company like ours to walk them through it and help them through that change management.
No, it certainly makes sense. I mean, when preventing mortality, obviously early intervention is key. Can you share how Van Beek's products are being used, in a preventable standpoint? I guess how producers can implement this ASAP.
Sure. So Integravix is a product that is fed in the feed. So we put that into the feed because anytime you introduce feed to humidity and the air, you are welcoming in molds and yeast that cause a problem with digestion. It causes a problem with feed efficiencies. And you might think you have fresh feed. You have to do a feed sample, right? You have to see exactly what's happening when it gets to the the pig. What are they taking in? Because they have to defend against it. And most feeds that we see are loaded with a high CFU count to start with, and then it just grows from there. So Integravix put into the feed helps reduce that load so the pig doesn't have to deal with it. And now we talk about feed efficiencies. There's another one, Integravol, which is a liquid application. We put that into a stock solution, and then that's metered out at a 1 to 128. And where we use that preventatively is anytime we're in a predictable stress situation. So weaning, um, transferring from the nursery, any kind of stressful situation right before farrowing. If we can do 2 days before, we'll give that piglet a much better chance to survive those first couple of days. So there's a lot of different tools we can use. We have two simple ones in the feed and in the water.
What are the most common root causes of mortality that you're seeing in livestock, and how can your product specifically target that underlying issue?
I spoke about one of them, and that's the feed. So a lot of times we don't realize you might smell a feed and you won't
Hmm.
smell or see 1 million colony forming units of mold or yeast per gram, and that's measured per gram. Now, take into account there's 454 grams in a pound. And how many pounds are they eating? So you won't see that. It will still smell fresh. There's a lot that takes place in the GI tract that can have a negative effect on the outcome of when those pigs are born. So the feed that that sow is getting, one, you want to make sure it is as low to zero or as close to zero of a CFU count as you can. And we can do that with IntegraVix. You also want to make sure you're adding in the beneficial compounds to cause their colostrum to be extremely elevated in quality. Because the first piglet's gonna get a bunch of those antibodies, and this last little guy, he's barely gonna get what it requires to stay alive. So, um, some of those things, are education, just simply knowing, and the other is good husbandry is another, area that I think most farmers can improve on, they just probably don't know how. And as technologies advance, I think it's important to educate oneself,
So,
on those.
so let's say you have a producer who's struggling with high mortality rates for whatever reason right now.
Mhm.
What kind of a return on investment could a producer expect if they start to put your products into some sort of health management strategy program?
Sure. Return on investment on the cost of our product, most producers can find at minimum a 4 to 1 return to a 10 to
Wow.
1 return.
Wow.
It's phenomenal. If you've got a high colony forming unit in the feed, guaranteed we can do a 4 to 1 return on the cost of IntegraVix sow.
How can you convince a producer? And I know we get used, all of us in all areas of life get used to doing things how we've always done them. How can you change a mindset with a producer, maybe to take a proactive approach in this area? And maybe there's a success story or two that you can share?
Sure. You have I think it's the same conversation as saving versus investing, right? And you can
Mhm.
take that model, that conversation, you can apply it to most things in your life, whether it's real estate investing or it's investing in the livestock that you have, the genetics that you have. The same thing goes for feed quality, and the same thing goes for water quality. And we always look at it as a necessary evil to have to feed the pigs, to have to make sure they have fresh water, at least that we think it's fresh water. But how often are we checking it? How often are we paying attention to it? So here are the metrics. Here are the things that we do. One, we have to be able to get access to the metrics, to the data in both the feed applications and the water. And it's a very simple analogy. If time is money, and we manage our money and we observe our money and we keep track of our money and we inventory our money, we have savings accounts, we get a bank statement. Why aren't we inventorying time?
Mhm.
And why aren't we inventorying the data that we're collecting from feed and water quality in our operation? There's a monumental, a huge improvement that can be gained simply by measuring, observing, and analyzing what's coming in on feed samples, on water samples. If you get really good at understanding what's in your water and what's in your feed, I guarantee you, you make better decisions. So the education of that, along with showing real world examples in in the field, and one of them is feed cleanup. So we will cause an increased appetite and we will cause pigs to eat a higher amount of feed simply by placing IntegraVix in the ration.
Well, Alex, we appreciate your time. It certainly makes sense. Alex VanBeek, the vice president with VanBeek Natural Science. Thanks so much for your time. Continued success in everything that you're trying to do in regards to helping producers with your products.
Hey, appreciate it, Vic.